kindness returned. The downtown cafe hummed with morning life as rain streaked the windows, blurring the city into soft gray smears. The scent of fresh coffee mingled with the damp air, a quiet comfort for those seeking shelter from the cold. Then the door creaked open. A gust of wind slipped in with a man in his early 50s. His threadbare coat clung to his frame, soaked through. Scuffed shoes left faint prints on the polished tile. His salt and pepper hair was wet, eyes weary with the weight of unseen battles. He approached the counter slowly, voice barely audible. "Just a black coffee, please." The barista, a young man with a sharp jaw and sharper attitude, rang him up. The older man patted his pockets, first with patience, then with growing panic. I think I left my wallet at home," he said, his voice tight with shame. "If it's all right, I could just sit until the rain passes." The barista crossed his arms and scoffed, voice rising to draw attention. "This isn't a shelter, pal. No money, no coffee. No loitering either." Laughter flickered from a nearby table of well-dressed patrons. "Imagine that," one said. "Beggars trying to act like customers." The man's face flushed. He turned toward the door. "Wait," came a voice. Clear, steady, and unmistakably kind. Emma, a waitress with a loose auburn ponytail and sleeves still damp from clearing tables, stepped forward. She pulled a $5 bill from her apron, pocket, and placed it on the counter. "I'll cover it," she said calmly. The barista frowned. "Emma, come on. You don't have to." "I'm not doing it for him," she said. "I'm doing it because I've been in his shoes, because I know what it's like to be judged for not having enough." Someone from the corner sneered. "What, hoping he tips you later?" Emma turned to the crowd. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Kindness isn't a transaction. Showing compassion doesn't make us weak. Mocking someone who's down, that's what makes us small. The cafe went quiet. Even the espresso machine seemed to hold its breath. She turned back to the man and smiled. "Please, sit. I'll bring your coffee." He hesitated, then nodded with glassy eyes, finding a seat by the window as the rain drummed softly against the glass. Emma delivered his coffee in silence. Around her, eyes averted. The air that once held judgment now carried something quieter. Shame and reflection. Later that night, as she cleared the last table, Emma felt the weight of the day still clinging to her. Whispers had followed her since. Nobody had said anything directly, but silence could scream when it wanted to. The next morning, her manager, Brian, called her into the office. "This is a business, not your charity project," he said, arms crossed. "I paid for the coffee," Emma replied, steady. "You embarrassed your coworker and made the customers uncomfortable." "No," she said, meeting his gaze. "He embarrassed himself." He narrowed his eyes. "You're here to serve, not to preach. Watch yourself." She left without another word. The kitchen staff avoided her. One server muttered, "Must be easy acting righteous when you still split rent with your sister." Emma didn't reply. She clocked out, walked into the drizzle, and caught the subway home. Her apartment was small, just one bedroom with peeling walls and drafty windows. Lily, her younger sister, lay curled on the couch beneath a blanket, pale with fever. "You're late," Lily whispered. "Caught in the rain." Emma smiled, reheating leftover porridge. She checked her wallet. $3, one subway token, a worn photo of their mother. She tucked it all back inside. No regret. Not for the coffee. Not for the consequences. That night, watching the rain trickle down her window, Emma remembered another time. She was 15. Their mother had collapsed in a market. People passed by, except one old woman who had offered water and wrapped a shawl around her. Emma never knew her name, but that act became a promise. When you can, be the one who stops. So, when she saw the man, wet, ashamed, invisible, she didn't hesitate. She saw him. And that was enough. She whispered to herself before bed, "I'd rather be mocked for doing the right thing than praised for doing nothing." 4 days passed. The stares continued. The gossip persisted. But Emma walked through it, all with quiet strength, shoulders squared. Then one morning, as the cafe bustled with routine chatter, the bell above the door chimed. Emma didn't look up at first, but something in the air shifted, stillness where there was noise, attention drawn without a word. A man entered, tall, immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit and silk scarf. His hair was neatly combed, his shoes polished. He looked like a man from a penthouse boardroom, not a neighborhood coffee shop. But when he met Emma's eyes, she knew. It was him. Not as he had been, wet and broken, but as he truly was. And he smiled. Emma froze. He didn't go to the counter. Instead, he walked straight to the table by the window, the same one where a soaked, humiliated man had once sat, and claimed it without a word. Her hand tightened around the damp cloth she was using to wipe down a table. Her heart thudded. Slowly, cautiously, she approached with a menu, uncertain whether to pretend not to recognize him or to acknowledge the truth head-on. Before she could say a word, he looked up. "I'm not here to order," he said. She paused. "I only have one question." She swallowed. "Why did you help me?" Emma blinked. I just couldn't watch it happen." "You didn't know me. You had nothing to gain." She hesitated. "You didn't look like someone asking for a handout. You looked like someone being made to feel small. And I know what that feels like." Without quite knowing why, she sat down across from him, placing the menu aside. "When I was 17, she said quietly, "my mom collapsed in the middle of a crowded market. No one helped. They walked around her like she was an inconvenience. Everyone, except one woman, an old lady with barely anything herself. She stayed, held my mom's hand. I promised myself that day, if I ever had the chance, I'd be that woman." He didn't interrupt. He just listened. "That morning," Emma whispered, "I remembered that promise." Silence settled between them. Then, he asked softly, You read?" Emma blinked. "Books?" He nodded. "I used to. Not so much anymore, but I like stories about ordinary people doing brave things." A faint smile crossed his lips. "Good choice." They began talking about books, cities, music, Bach and Chopin, about why people become cruel when they feel powerless. He mentioned authors Emma hadn't read, and she didn't pretend to know them. She listened with curiosity, not pretense. Minutes passed, then more. The usual clatter of the cafe faded into a distant hum. At one point, Emma laughed, truly laughed, for the first time in days. "You're not what I expected," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "What did you expect?" She shrugged. "Someone who just wanted to say thank you and disappear." He looked down, then met her eyes again. "I've had wealth for a long time," he said quietly, "but very few people have made me feel human. Again, that day, you did." Emma said nothing. She didn't need to. In that moment, they were not Waitress and Billionaire, not stranger and savior. Just two people, just two souls, finally seen. And neither of them would forget it. Exactly 1 week later, an envelope arrived. There was no return address, no name, just heavy ivory paper embossed in gold with the unmistakable crest of the Annesley, a 5-star hotel known more for hosting heads of state than cafe waitresses from Wavetown. Emma's name was printed clearly at the top. Emma L. Bennett, guest of Charles H. Evelyn. She stared at it for a long time. The afternoon light caught the gold seal like a secret daring her to open it. She nearly didn't go. But curiosity, laced with something she couldn't quite name, a tightness in her chest, a whisper of possibility, led her to the hotel 3 days later, dressed in her best blouse, shoes borrowed from her roommate, hair pinned back with trembling fingers. Walking through the revolving doors felt like stepping into another world. Polished marble floors, chandeliers like falling stars, and people who moved as though the world belonged to them. At the front desk, she barely managed to steady her voice. "Emma Bennett, I think I have a meeting." The concierge nodded without surprise and directed her to a private lounge on the 21st floor. "Mr. Evelyn will join you shortly, Mr. Evelyn." She rode the elevator in silence, her heart pounding. The lounge was hushed and opulent. Deep leather chairs, soft jazz from invisible speakers, a view of the skyline like a throne room in the sky. She stood by the window, unsure if she belonged anywhere near a place like this. Then the door opened. She turned. Charles entered. Not the man from the cafe, not even the suited figure she'd imagined, but someone else entirely. He wore presence the way others wore fine tailoring. 2 assistants lingered behind him, then quietly slipped away. "Emma," he said, his voice smooth, low. "Thank you for coming." She tried to smile, but her voice caught. "This isn't exactly a coffee shop." He gestured to the table near the window, already prepared with tea, fruit, and an untouched espresso. "Please, sit." She obeyed, not sure if she was being honored or inspected. He folded his hands. "I wanted to tell you in person. Anything less would have felt dishonest." She waited. "My name," he said, "is Charles H. Evelyn. I'm the founder of Evelyn Holdings. We operate in 12 countries, mostly infrastructure and social impact investments." Emma blinked, stunned. She opened her mouth, but no words came. "I wasn't pretending to be someone else," he added quickly. "But that morning at the cafe, I dressed down. I didn't bring my wallet. I needed to know, what would people see when there was nothing to gain?" She stared down at her tea, as if it could offer answers. "My wife died 15 years ago," he said quietly. "Cancer. Sudden. We never had children. After she passed, I stopped trusting people. I stopped believing kindness was real. So I started traveling, anonymously, visiting cities and towns. Not just to see the world, but to see if anyone still lived with heart in it." He looked at her deeply. "That day, I found someone." Emma's throat tightened. "You set me up," she said, her voice trembling. "No," he said gently. "I didn't ask for anything. I didn't even approach you. I just sat. And you chose." She shook her head. "I don't know whether to feel grateful or manipulated." "I understand," he said softly. Emma stood abruptly, her chair scraping, against the rug. "So what now? You tell me I passed your little morality test? What? Do you write me a check? Offer me a job? A car?" Charles didn't flinch. "I offer you nothing unless you choose to hear me out." Her breath was shaky. Inside her, a storm. Shock, anger, awe, confusion. He stood too, walked to the window. "I wasn't testing you, Emma," he said again. "I was searching for something I thought the world had lost, and maybe for someone to remind me what it meant to be seen. Not as a billionaire, not as a burden, just as a man. She looked at him, really looked, past the suit, the room, the skyline, into his eyes, the same ones that had once looked up at her from beneath soaked hair and a threadbare coat. That man was still here, and somehow that mattered most. She exhaled slowly. "I don't know what this is," she said, "or what you think it could be, but I know who I am." Charles turned, something unspoken in his face. "And who is that?" he asked. She smiled, quiet. "True. Someone who didn't do it to be noticed, and someone who's not afraid to walk away. If that's all this turns out to be." He nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "That's what makes you different." And for the first time, Emma understood. This hadn't been a test. It was an invitation, not into wealth, but into something far rarer. To be seen, to be remembered, not for what you have, not for who you impress, but for who you are when no one is watching. Emma didn't expect to hear from him again. She assumed the moment, strange and surreal, was over. A window she'd peered through, but never meant to step beyond. But the next afternoon, another envelope arrived. No gold seal this time, just her name, handwritten in careful script. Inside was a short note. "Emma, I'm traveling to Montreal next week. I go every year. It's quieter there, peaceful. I'd like you to come, not for business, not for formality. Just company, just conversation, no expectations, only a sincere invitation." Charles tucked inside was a round-trip train ticket. She held it in her hand for a long, long time. Emma held the ticket in her hand for a long time. Later that night, in the cramped kitchen of their apartment, she stood over a pot of boiling rice, lost in thought. Her younger sister Lily was curled up on the couch, coughing softly between sips of tea. "You're quiet," Lily said. Emma gave a faint smile. "That's rare, huh?" Lily tilted her head. "You thinking about him?" Emma nodded. She told Lily everything. The invitation, the envelope, the strange mixture of awe and unease it stirred in her. "It feels like a door just opened," she said quietly. "And I'm not sure I belong behind it. What if I embarrass myself? What if it changes the way I see me, or the way he does?" Lily studied her for a long moment. Then she said something Emma would never forget. "You've spent your whole life making space for everyone else. Maybe it's time you see what it's like when someone makes space for you." That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay awake, listening to the rain tick against the window pane, the low hum of buses passing below, the old kitchen clock ticking steadily through the dark. She thought about the cafe, about the laughter, the mockery, about Charles, his eyes, the humility in them, the search for something human. And she thought about her mother, who used to say, "Don't wait for life to come find you. Sometimes you have to go find it yourself." By dawn, her mind was made up. She packed a single bag, 2 changes of clothes, a half-finished book, her worn journal. She left grocery money on the fridge, scrawled a note for Lily, and gave her a goodbye hug that lingered longer than usual. The train station. She stood on the platform with her heart balanced somewhere between fear and hope. When the train arrived with a soft hiss, she stepped forward. Not into luxury or fantasy, but into the unknown. Charles was waiting in the cabin. No bodyguards, no ceremony. Just him by the window, a book in his lap, 2 coffees on the table. He looked up and smiled. Not the polished smile of a man used to being served, but something real, warm. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. Emma sat across from him, setting her bag gently at her feet. "I didn't think I would either," she replied. "But then I remembered." She paused. "The world doesn't change unless you walk into it." Charles nodded slowly. "I'm not offering anything," he said. "No promises, no golden road. I just thought, maybe it's time I stopped walking alone." Emma turned to the window. The city blurred behind them, giving way to trees. The rhythm of the train settled in her chest like a second heartbeat. She turned back to him. "Maybe we both needed someone to remind us that we're still allowed to choose something different." And so, the train carried them forward. Two unlikely travelers, bound not by fate, but by choice. Emma didn't know where the road would lead, but for the first time she wasn't afraid of the answer. She wasn't chasing escape or riches. She was walking toward something honest, and that, she realized, was enough. The days that followed weren't what she expected. No 5-star suites, no yachts, no glittering brunches. Instead, she woke in quiet villages and dusty towns, stayed in modest guest houses, rode through back roads in Charles's weathered Jeep, with the windows down and the wind tangling her hair. Charles didn't live like the billionaire the world believed him to be. They visited orphanages on the outskirts of small cities, where children ran into his arms, shouting his name. Not because he brought toys, but because he remembered their birthdays, favorite books, the little things. They spent time at shelters for recovering addicts, where Charles said little but listened deeply. They sat on half-finished porches of homes he'd quietly funded, eating soup made by hands that had no idea the man across from them owned half the skyline. Emma watched it all with quiet awe. He never introduced himself, never corrected anyone. When she asked him why, while sorting boxes at a food pantry in Vermont, he simply said, "Because the moment they know who I am, they stop talking to me like I'm human." And everywhere they went, Emma saw it in his eyes. He wasn't looking for thanks. He was looking for connection. And more than once, she caught her reflection in a passing window and realized she was smiling in a way she hadn't in years. One evening, in a quiet forest cabin in Quebec, they sat on the porch as crickets sang and pine filled the air. A single lantern glowed between them. Charles poured chamomile tea. Emma curled into a blanket, hands wrapped around the mug. They sat in silence, not the awkward kind, but the kind that feels like breathing in rhythm. "I've had people offer me everything," Charles said at last, his voice low. "Comfort, even love." He paused. "But I don't need someone to love me. I need someone who understands why I love the things I do. Someone who doesn't need to be dazzled, just present." Emma didn't answer right away. She let the words settle between them like dust in warm light. "I don't know if I'm that person," she said honestly. "I don't know if I understand all of your reasons, but I do know this." She looked at him, eyes reflecting more than just lantern light. "I've never felt more like myself than I do when I'm with you." Charles didn't smile. He didn't reach for her. He just looked peaceful, as if she'd given him an answer he hadn't realized he was waiting for. They didn't touch hands. They didn't kiss. What they shared wasn't about closeness. It was about recognition. Two people, shaped by different lives, finding quiet resonance in the space between their scars. Later that night, Emma sat by the window, writing in her journal. Her thoughts came in fragments. Quiet. Found. Seen. She closed the book, tucked it under her pillow, and whispered to the dark. "I didn't come looking for love, but maybe Maybe I stumbled into something braver. Outside, the stars blinked. Above, like quiet witnesses to a story still unfolding. Not a fairy tale, not fate. Just two souls who'd once believed they were alone, until they weren't. Yet Charles went on, his voice calm. You don't have to run it. You don't even need to be involved. But it will exist. Because you existed. Because one person chose to see another, not for what they had, but for who they were. Emma laid, the folder on the table, her fingers gently resting on its edge. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Charles offered a soft smile. You don't have to say anything. But she did. She took a deep, grounding breath. I'm honored. More than I can express. But if it's okay, I'd like to try something different. He nodded, silently encouraging her. I want to build something myself. From the ground up. It doesn't have to carry my name. Or yours. I'm not turning down your gift. I'm just choosing to believe in the same thing you believed in when you saw me. Her voice was steady now. Someone once gave me the chance to believe in myself. I want to pass that on. Not through money, but through presence, through showing up when no one else does. Charles was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, not surprised but proud, radiantly, deeply proud, like a man who'd always known this moment would come. You already have, he said. Emma looked at him, the man who had once stood embarrassed in a cafe, dismissed by strangers, now her friend, her mirror, her unexpected compass. There was no name for what they were, not lovers, not partners, not quite family, but something real, enduring, a quiet resonance that needed no explanation. Charles reached across the table and gently took her hand. Whatever path you choose, he said softly, I'll always be in your corner. She nodded, eyes shining. Nothing more needed to be said, because their story had never relied on declarations. It was built on quiet choices, patient belief, and the courage to let go, not in loss, but in trust. They sat together as the sun dipped below the city skyline, casting long golden shadows across buildings that now looked less like walls and more like promises. Promises that kindness, once freely given, never truly disappears, and that sometimes the deepest kind of love is letting someone walk their own road, knowing they carry a part of you in every step. The rain had returned, soft and steady, as the final letters were pressed into the window. The first cup. Across the street, under a dark umbrella, Emma stood watching. The cafe was real now, alive, but it wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone. Where a man had once stood soaked and shamed for forgetting his wallet, she had handed over $5 and unknowingly rewritten the arc of her own life. Now, rebuilt from scratch with the help of volunteers, quiet donors, and one man who never asked for credit, the cafe glowed with warmth. Beneath the logo, etched in simple script, were the words, "No one should have to earn kindness." Inside, shelves of books lined the walls. Jazz played, low. A chalkboard by the counter didn't list prices, just a message. Your first cup is on us. Your second, if you can, on someone else. Each table bore not a number, but a word. Hope, trust, begin. Emma stood by the window and watched. An exhausted nurse, a delivery driver, a mother with 2 children. This was no longer just a cafe. It was sanctuary, dignity, a pause in a world that rarely offered one. Then the door opened. An older man stepped in, hunched, soaked from the rain. His hands trembled slightly as he held the door, hesitant, apologetic. A young barista stepped toward him. "Sir, this place is for customers only, if you don't." Emma was there before the sentence finished. She gently touched the barista's shoulder. "It's all right," she said, turning to the man. "Would you like a seat by the window?" He nodded gratefully. She smiled. "And what would you like today?" "Just something warm," he murmured. "To sit, maybe. It's been a long morning." Her voice softened. "Then let's make it longer, with a little peace." She glanced back at the barista. "Here," she said gently. "The first cup is always on us. No questions, no shame." He nodded slowly, eyes wide with understanding. As she moved toward the back, something pulled at her. She turned. Across the street under an umbrella stood Charles. He didn't wave, didn't come inside, just watched. She met his gaze. Between them passed a quiet understanding, gratitude, farewell, and something else, a promise. He nodded once, then turned, disappearing into the rain. Later, during the cafe's soft opening, Emma stood beside the old upright piano with a microphone in one hand and a warm cup in the other. Every seat was filled. The air was thick with comfort. "Years ago," she began, "I paid for someone's coffee. I didn't know who he was. I just saw someone being made small, and I couldn't look away." She paused. "That cup cost me $5, but what it gave me was a new way to see the world." Heads nodded, a few eyes filled. "I thought I was helping a man who was lost," she said, "but he helped me find a version of myself I didn't know I was allowed to become." She set the cup down gently. "This cafe isn't about selling coffee. It's about presence, about showing up when no one else does." Her voice lowered, a whisper meant for everyone. "A man once told me, kindness doesn't need to be remembered. It only needs to be continued." She smiled. "So that's what we're doing here, one cup at a time." Almost as an afterthought, she added, "Some loves don't need romance. Some lives are changed by nothing more than a kind gesture, and the courage to mean it." Applause rose like sunlight. A saxophone began to play, and somewhere in the back, a first cup was poured, for someone who didn't know they needed it. Until